Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how his daughter's illness and hospitalization led him to a diagnosis of his own of PTSD. It then inspired him to start his own podcast as a way to cope and heal. Please help me in welcoming Tim by Seagull. Tim, thank you so much for joining me here today. It is great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I am admiring your background. I see a lot of fun things back there. Real quick, tell me what's your favorite Funko Pop you got going on back there?
All right. So it's one of two. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm a massive nerd. I admit that freely and openly. I wear it as a badge of honor these days. So for me, it's anything Star Wars related. But my two favorite Funko Pops, one is the concept art of what should have or what could have been Luke Skywalker in the beginning. Originally, it was going to be called Luke Starkiller. And so I have a Luke Starkiller Funko Pop. And that's really very cool. And then that name got reused years later in a Star Wars video game called The Force Unleashed, where the main protagonist's name in the game is Starkiller. So it's just kind of cool. So I kind of came back around. And then the other one of my favorite characters from the Star Wars Clone Wars TV animated TV series was Captain Rex. And then that character also came into Star Wars Rebels, and there's Old Man Rex, with the shaved head and the beard and, and I just found Old Man Rex. I literally just got it a few days ago, and I'm still kind of giggle about it, that I have it back over there. But yeah, so those are my two favorites.
I could see your face light up when you said that. So that was super cool. So now that we know you're a big Star Wars fan and a little bit of a nerd at heart, a proud nerd, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, let's see. I'm 44. I'll be 45 next month. Married for 23 years. I have 3 beautiful children who all act far too much like me, which is a problem for their mother. Not so much for me, but for their mother. And I have, I've been doing podcasting now for just about 2 years, and I have 3 shows. And I got into podcasting as a way to help myself try and deal with some of my own mental health issues that I was dealing with, and some issues. And we can get into more detail about that if you want. After my daughter's lengthy hospitalization, there were reasons why I should have been in counseling before that, but I had kind of ignored them all, as us really intelligent men tend to do. But I got into podcasting for that reason. And then it went from talking to people about their stories and hearing their stories and just being impressed by, what some people have gone through and the ways that they've, rose to the challenge of life, and pretty much telling life to kiss their butt and move on. And I just love that they've really moved up to that challenge. That to me is really cool. I went from that to, I had a friend who had a Facebook group. And when I joined, it was about 30,000 members. We have 160,000 members in the group now, and it's rapidly growing. And so we said, well, you know what? These guys love sci-fi content. Let's give them a podcast. And so we do that now. And we'll be releasing our 54th episode of that podcast. That doesn't count all the live shows and bonus episodes and things like that. I don't count those as episodes, although other sources do. So we're up to 91 there. But we'll be having technically our 100th episode coming up here shortly, but episode 54 releases this week. I'm very excited about that. And then I just started a new podcast where we talk about everything pop culture related. And so, because there was only so many ways I could shoehorn people into sci-fi topics, I wanted to, but I found myself having to say no to people. I couldn't, they didn't have and I don't want to call it a tragic backstory, but, everybody's got a backstory, but just some people have had to work harder with their backstory, and some folks didn't have a backstory that would lean themselves into going into my first show, which is called Focused on Forward. And then I couldn't fit them into funny science fiction because, trust me, I tried. And then, so one of my co-hosts on Funny Science Fiction, we've been friends for a long time, and she and I said, well, you know what? We have really good on-screen chemistry. We think so anyway. And we play well off each other. I always say that she's the little sister I never wanted. And, I'm the big brother that she never wanted either. So, but yeah. So we went out and started a new show called Culture Addicts, which has been nice because it gave us the opportunity to talk to people in all these different lanes. And, like I've talked to, the episode we released today was with a young lady named April Rose Gabrielli, who's, her song right now is number 24 on the Billboard charts. And so she's got a really cool song, and that's not her only song, but she's got a lot of cool music. And we had an opportunity to talk with her, and that was cool. And I've got episodes coming up where we've talked with Stephen Perkins, the drummer from Jane's Addiction, which was awesome. I'm a child of the 90s, big grunge fan. And so to talk to somebody who made music that was making the music of my teenage years, awesome. But yeah, we got to talk with him, and those are conversations I wouldn't have been able to have on the other two shows. And so I'm very, very excited about that. But yeah, and just, I'm like I said, a big nerd. I love science fiction. I love superheroes. I love, but I'm also boring. I love staying home with my family and hanging out, watching TV, playing video games with my kids. We have two dogs. We've got a pit bull and a corgi. Because we decided to go with opposite day when we got the second dog. We have short and low to the ground, a dust mop. Let's get something tall and hyper. All right. So, excuse me.
I love that because first off, corgis are adorable. They're just so cute. But I totally relate because I have two Pekingese dogs now, which are also little fluff balls. But when I got the first one, I had an English Mastiff. So, so we had one 220-pound dog and then one 14-pound dog.
You hope that the big dog didn't step on it at any time. Yeah.
Correct. And they got along actually better than the two same-size dogs do.
That's funny.
Now, well, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast because I love the juxtaposition that you have going on, like with the serious Focused on Forward. And then you've also developed some podcasts that are a little more lighthearted. So talk to me about the Focused on Forward and what drove you to do that in relation to your own mental health.
Yeah. So, in 2019, my daughter was hospitalized for 97 days. And throughout that 97 days, 95 of those days, I stayed at the hospital. 97 of the days, my wife did. So there was only 2 days at the hospital because we have 2 other children. And my boys were old enough at that point where they could pretty much take care of themselves. But I was also worried that my house was going to turn into like Lord of the Flies without some appropriate adult supervision. And if you don't get the Lord of the Flies reference, please go back and read the book. You're missing out on a classic piece of American literature. So anyway, my daughter spent 97 days in the hospital. 33 of those were in the ICU. We nearly lost her twice. She came down with a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which we thought she had the flu going in. So we took her to the hospital so that we could get her an IV. We thought she was just really dehydrated. We were admitted to the hospital that night. And we didn't leave for, like I said, 97 days later, we were out of the hospital. And it was kind of a massive kick to the head to realize that your daughter was as sick as she was because, instantly there's this wave of guilt that comes over you because my daughter had been complaining for a couple days, but it was also springtime in Michigan. And in springtime in Michigan, you have cold mornings followed by really warm afternoons. And the weather's kind of all over the place. One day it's rainy and muggy and cold, or rainy and cold. And the next day it's warm and muggy. And it does one hell of a number on your sinuses. It really does. So she was complaining about a little bit of a sore throat and sinus, stuff. And I was like, well, honey, you're fine. It's seasonal. You'll be okay. And there's a strong potential that some of it was allergies because I have fall and spring allergies. My boys have allergies as well. I'm like, well, this might be another gift that dad has given you. So, we really thought it was that. And she was having some leg pain. We thought she was going through growth spurts because none of us are short. I'm 6'3". My one son is 6'3". My other son's 6'5". My wife's 5 foot, almost 5'9", and she was going through quite a growth spurt at the moment. My wife had just taken her shopping, bought a whole bunch of new clothes for her. So we really thought that that's what this was. It wasn't. We didn't know that. But so it's not that we were doing something wrong. We didn't know that we were doing something wrong because it hadn't presented itself as anything other than a possible cold or head cold or flu that would be typical for that time of year. But when we knew it was more serious is when she could no longer hold food and water down. And when all of a sudden she was complaining that she had leg pain. She went from having leg pains to I can't stand on my legs. Mm-hmm. And so we took her to the Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids, which is called DeVos Children's Hospital, which, by the way, if you're in Michigan and you need a children's hospital, please go to DeVos. They're incredibly wonderful, beautiful people. Amazing children's hospital. Anyway, enough about that. Not enough about that, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so we spent, like I said, 97 days. And when you're going from a point of being a parent who as a parent, you take care of everything for your child. You do all these different things. Even at 12 years old, there's things that you do for your child because you're the parent, right? Well, when you're in the hospital with a child, you're the parent, but you're not doing the things. And that becomes very hard to accept after a little while, especially when Guillain-Barré really started to kick in. Because throughout the first week of the hospital, which we thought we were only going to be there for a week, maybe two. That's what the original prognosis was. They said, we'll get you in here. We're going to get you some medicines. You'll be home in 2 weeks tops. All right. Well, it's a 2-week detour. Okay, we can live with this. It wasn't ideal, but we thought, but then the disease really kind of kicked in, and we went from some motor skill and function issues like the grasping of hands and moving fingers and being able to hold a spoon or write with a pen or something, to not being able to do that, to losing function of her hands, to losing feeling in her arms and legs, and she ended up being paralyzed from the neck down. She has recovered from that. She's walking and talking and doing all those things now. Guillain-Barré can do this for either an extended period of time or an intermittent period of time. So we were fortunate that even though it was 97 days, it wasn't, it's not something that's not a thing that we'll have to deal with continuously. But she had to learn how to walk. She had to learn how to, do all these motor skill things again. She had a couple of different issues that caused us to have to go back to the ICU. So that 33 days was in different stints. There was we were there 7 days the first time, 11, 12 the second time, and then whatever the math is to, do the rest on the other one. But she had to have an emergency lung puncture to remove fluid from her. And I say fluid, it looked more like split pea soup, that really thick green, kind of almost like just pure mucus. It was disgusting, but almost 2 liters of fluid from her lungs. And we went, when you watch your child go through this, and, that's hard enough. But when you're watching her go through all these things and you almost lose your child twice, it really does a number on you emotionally and mentally. And, because especially as a father, and I'm saying this from a father's perspective, as a father, you want to be, I'm the father, I'm the protector of my family. And I felt like, even though I knew that it wasn't something that I could control, I still felt like I had failed my family. Like I had let my, however this came about, I didn't do something enough to prevent that from happening. So when we came out of the hospital, my head was an absolute bag of cats. I had faced all these issues with my daughter and her health, and I realized that there was a legitimate, genuine issue here that I had to have addressed when we decided we were going to buy gifts for the nurses in the ICU. Because, and I've said this on every time I've told this story, and I will probably say it every time until the day I die. ICU nurses and doctors are not paid nearly enough. I don't care what they're being paid, double it, triple it. They deserve way so much more, especially in settings where it's a pediatrics or neonatal. The things that they see on a day-to-day basis, the things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, I wish I could give every one of them a hug. They are amazing people. They have a fortitude about them that I simply don't have. I could not do their job. I know that. And, thank God that they can. But we decided we wanted to get them a gift. And, we had noticed that they all drink out of these little cute little cups with the straws and these little tumbler things. And so we ordered a whole lot of them. We went through and we tried to remember everybody's names, and we're like, all right, throw 10 extra on the order just in case. And we just went around our intention was to go back to the hospital because she had her first visit with one of her rehabilitation doctors. And we were right in town. So she was like, well, while we're there, can we go deliver these gifts? I'm like, yeah, it'll be great. No problem. So we pulled up and in. I couldn't go in the hospital. I sat down on the little roundabout in there where on this bench on the outside of the hospital and bawled my eyes out. I didn't understand why. I mean, I locked up. I could not move. I physically could not. I had a panic attack outside the hospital. Come to find out, my counselor tells me that's a form of PTSD due to hospitalization and emotional trauma, which was hard for me to wrap my head around because, I kept saying, well, I didn't, it wasn't me that all these things happened. It was my daughter, but you don't really realize it as a parent that you're going through all these things and you're the one that's helping there, trying to be the emotional support and the mental support and all these other things. And so that affects you and impacts you very greatly. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me that something is wrong and I need to go get this looked at. So I started going to counseling, and that she helped me to identify that. My counselor is awesome. Matter of fact, met with her today, kind of re-upping, trying to, topping off the fluids, so to speak. There's a car analogy for you. But anyway, she had suggested that I start like a journal or something, and I laughed because I'm not a writer. And I was like, that's not going to happen. I tried blogging back in the day, but that was so inconsistent. It wasn't even funny. It's still out there, I think. Possible. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I'm going to have to look for that later today, see if it's still a thing out there. But anyway, so she said, well, what about record yourself on video, just, expressing your feelings. I'm like, you mean like a video blog? She's like, well, you can call it that if you want. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to sit there and just talk to myself. That's not going to happen. She's like, well, we got to figure out some way for you to express your emotions and get some of these things out of you. And I went, well, we haven't found it yet, but we'll circle back. So later on that night, or not that night, I don't know if it was that night or upcoming, but I was talking to one of my friends who's also a podcaster. By the way, if you're interested in finding a really good podcast, please go check out the Curiosity Hour podcast. It's hosted by my buddy Tommy and his pal Dan. And I won't even try Dan's last name because I mercilessly slaughter it every single time.
Is it more difficult than yours?
Oh, it makes mine look like a walk in the park. But Tommy and Dan have an amazing show, the Curiosity Hour podcast. And Tommy said, well, why don't you start a podcast and talk about, what's going on? And I said, nobody wants to sit there and listen to me, whine and bellyache for, an hour every week about why I've got it so bad. He says, well, don't make it about you. Make it about other people. Talk to them about their stories and what they're doing. And where it's fitting, you can interject. And this is what I've been through. And you guys can talk together. And I went, well, I could do that. yeah, that I could do. And so that's how Focused on Forward started. So I sat down, like many podcasters did, and I understand still do. When your first episode, you don't really understand sometimes all the things that go into making a podcast. Look good, sound good, and be appealing, and all these things. I used my iPhone and open mic, just talked into it. Hey, we all got to start somewhere, right?
Exactly.
And so I recorded a little trailer, open mic, and my buddy listened to it. He goes, "It's not bad, but you need a microphone." And I went, "Oh, yeah, I've got one of those." He says, "Okay, good. Use that next time." So I used on my episode, right? I did an intro episode. It's about 20 minutes long. The very first episode of Focused on Forward is talking about, not in really any depth, because I don't think at that point I was prepared or equipped to be able to talk about what we had gone through in depth. But then I was, doing the hold the microphone of the iPhone earbuds up to your mouth and talking to those.
That was your microphone?
That was my microphone. He didn't specify. In my defense, he didn't specify which one.
I love it.
All I heard was microphone. I'm like, I got an inline
I got
microphone.
One. Yeah,
it's inline right on my headphones. It'll be great. But it's kind of funny. I go back and I listen to those first couple episodes, and they always say, hey, don't be ashamed of your first couple episodes. I'm not, but I also look back and go, man, I learned so much from those first couple. So I started off with my first couple episodes, and I found that for me that this was I call it the cheapest form of therapy I've ever had. Because I got to talk with people who are just crushing it in life. They've gone through things where lesser people would have been crushed by life, and these guys are just. I draw so much power and inspiration from the stories that they've imparted and the things that they've gone through. And I've talked with people who, my very first episode was with my good friend Michelle, who lost her son at 2 years of age. I think he was 2. I hope I'd have to go back and listen for sure, but he was very young, somewhere between 2 and 3, I believe. And she tells us, it's a very heartbreaking story of everything that she went through with him and his health challenges and struggles. And, I learned the importance of not talking over my guests and giving them, opportunity to tell their story without me going, well, hey, yeah, and I found that when you sit back and you listen to some of the stories that other people go through, you don't have to go through the exact same thing that they've gone through to find something in their story that's helpful. And so Focused on Forward is a audio only podcast. I used to do some live shows with it, and I might come back around to those, but for right now, it's on a hiatus right now, to be honest with you. I just, with starting with some of the health challenges my daughter was having and starting up a third podcast, I was like, we're going to take a little break from Focused on Forward. So I just, like last week, was my season 2 finale. I'm going to start it back the first of the year of 2022. And I've already got my guests lined up, and I'm starting to get that ready and get that back so we can start cooking with that show again. But I found that you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to have the same exact story. And I found that there were people who had gone through all these sometimes horrific things in life. But I asked, and I'll tell you this part. I ask every guest the same 2 questions. I've done this for 2 seasons. I don't think I'll probably change for season 3. I might throw in a third question. I'm debating that right now. But one of the things that I love about the show is at the end of the show, after they've talked, because we don't just focus on what they've gone through. We focus on forward. How they're moving forward. So yeah, we talk about what they've gone through, but at a certain point, I ask them, I say, okay, well, where's the point where you became focused on forward? How did you move forward? And then we start turning the corner and talking about all the things that they're doing to help themselves keep going every day. And that's the part of the show that I love, because there's some really powerful stories, but then at the end, there's the 2 questions that come in. And I love this too, because I ask the same two questions, and they are, looking back on the entirety of your journey, what's the greatest lesson that you've learned? And so there's a lot of truth that comes out in that little question, because sometimes it's a very simple answer and they have a one-word answer, or sometimes it's, just a couple of words. But that's a very powerful question, because it helps people to see, not just that there's a culmination to the story that they've been listening to for the last 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever it may have been. But there's something for that person has used to help them to move forward. And that's the nugget that I want people to really kind of hang on to and hold on to. And the second question, which is pretty similar, is, what's the greatest piece of advice that you've been given? And I love that question because, I have a piece of advice that and if you listen to the show, you'll hear me repeat it often. And if you're one of my children, I'll apologize again, because I use it at home all the time, and I'm sure they're sick to death of hearing it. But I always like to say, it doesn't matter how you fall, it matters that you get up. And I think that's true in so many forms of life. Life is going to do what it can to knock us down. Each and every day, we're pummeled by life in one way or another. So we're going to fall. But do we lay there in the dirt and just go, well, I can't get up, I can't do anything, life kicked me down? Or do we find a way around it, and we find a way to pick ourselves up, and we find a way to get ourselves back moving again? And so I like hearing the advice that people give in that portion of the show, because, there's well, I don't have it. Well, I do have it right here. This is my notebook. And on this notebook, that is full of pieces of advice that I have written down from other people, and notes that I have taken about, interactions with them. And, there's a lot of times that, it's a good thing that it's an audio only show, because most of the time people would only see the top of my head, because, I'm sitting here writing,
furiously scribbling away.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. So, and that's where I think, between live shows and pre-recorded episodes, I want to say we're in the high 80s on for that show. So, but it's been nice. It's been a very helpful and growth encouraging atmosphere for me, because I've been able to take different aspects of what people have gone through and their stories. And there's been times where I listen to my own shows, not just for like, oh, hey, I've got a word whisker here I need to cut off. But sometimes I listen to my own shows because there's been people who I've interviewed where I've had to listen to their story 2 and 3 times to get every little nugget out of there, because they've people's stories aren't typically just one layer, and they've got all these different things going on. Right. And so I'll go back and I'll listen 2 and 3 times just so I can, like, yep, I missed that point last time. That's a good note. All right, we're going to try that, so I find it helpful.
I really connected with so much of what you just said, even from talking about your first episode and how you told a little bit of your own story, because that's exactly what I did with my first episode, and realized how difficult it was, first off, just to talk to nobody. That was really hard. And I remember the first time I recorded it, I felt great. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've said so much. Like, this has been so hard. And it was like 14 minutes long. And I said, okay, I guess I got to do this again and actually tell the story. Mm-hmm. You said you weren't super ready, initially to kind of tell the whole story, but how was that for you? Even just the 20, 25 minutes of sharing everything that you had been through in such a short amount of time with your family?
Well, so I had a very similar experience to what you just said. I did an episode and I'm used to getting up in front of people and talking. I have no problem getting, and I can talk just about anything. You usually give me a topic and point me in the right direction. I'll talk. It was weird. It really was. I felt super uncomfortable. I was very nervous in sharing it. And I think the first time I recorded it and I played it back, because I was going to edit it and I was going to post it that night. And, this is really good. I think I was at 9 minutes. And I was like, I skipped so much. There's like Cliff Notes, and then there was Tim Notes. And the Tim Notes was apparently the 9-minute version. And that had to be refreshed because there were so many things that I left out. There were parts of the story where you could not make a logical leap from where I had started to where I had gotten to and how I had even gotten there. And so I went back through and I decided I was going to make a little bit of an outline. So I made an outline just so I had some talking points so that if I got nervous, I wouldn't, space out and I would have a way to direct myself through. So I did that. And that was actually very helpful because now I think I ended up somewhere at 21 to 23 minutes, somewhere in there. But I also realized that I never wanted to do a podcast where it was just me talking because that wasn't going to be a thing. I think I'm far better where I have somebody that I can talk to, even if it's in small format issues. But when I told the wider version of the story at the 20 something minute story, I sat down to listen to it and I cried. It was one thing to have it all written down and for me to see it up on there on the wall with all my notes and on all that stuff. It was a whole nother thing for me to listen back to it and to hear my own voice expressing my own feelings. That was difficult for me. And so I sat on that, I think, for about 2 weeks, maybe 3, before I actually posted it because I knew that I had to get it out there because I had interviews lined up and I wanted to have that out there as an introduction to me and my story as to why I was even sitting there talking to other people and what they had gone through. I didn't, I wanted there to be context is what it comes down to. I felt in order to validate my podcast and for people to listen to it and feel that there was worth to it, that they had to be something to give context to why it was important for them to listen to my show. So yeah, it took me a couple weeks to get it back out, but eventually I did. But that's probably the only episode that I actually don't go back and listen to. Mainly because, it was still pretty fresh in my mind. We got out of the hospital in July of 2019, and I actually don't think I posted that until February or March of 2020. Right before the good old shutdown. And, but yeah, we were still dealing with some things that were very fresh from coming from the hospital. I was just getting into counseling. I had pushed it back and pushed it off so much up until right about the turn of the year where I was like, okay, fine, I'll talk to somebody. And mainly because I knew that, it was late fall when the issue at the hospital happened. But I pushed it off and went like, yeah, okay. I just got to work through that. And I've said this before on at other times, but one of the things I used to say is, to my kids when they were growing up was suck it up. You're a hockey player. None of us were hockey players. I don't know why I said that, but we're big hockey fans. But, because the premise behind that though, was that, a hockey player, when he gets hurt, he sucks it up. He's out for his next shift. I mean, there's guys who get their teeth knocked out and they're out skating 40 seconds, minute and a half later on their next shift. They're not missing a shift. There's guys who have broken hands. They just tape the crap out of the hand. They're back out there the next shift doing what they got to do. They might miss a shift, but that's about it. And so, we always kind of joke around about that. Hey, suck it up. You're a hockey player, And so I kept telling myself that just suck it up. You're a hockey player. You'll be fine. You'll be all right. And I just kind of minimalized everything that had happened. And what really pushed me into saying that I need to do something was the fact that I knew that I had this issue. I didn't know what was causing it or what was causing that reaction. But every time there was something even hospital related, I would freeze up. And that's a problem when your daughter has a chronic illness. That's a big problem. I could go to my daughter's doctor's office because that was not at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I saw this man every day for 90 some odd days, he was there every morning, checked in on Kendall, everything. Yeah, I had no problem seeing him and talking to him because it was at a different location. And I don't, I still don't quite understand everything, how the brain works and why it worked that way, but it did. But the other issue was that I had a reoccurring nightmare of one of the nights where we almost lost my daughter. And I saw that every single night when I went to bed for 3 months. I was deprived of sleep for about 3 months because I was trying to do all these different things and I was getting maybe an hour or two a night of sleep. I'd pass out at my desk right here in my chair, just, because just dead tired. And, eventually it got to the point where between lack of sleep and other mental health issues and things, that's why I went, because I was at the point where I was sitting at my desk and I would just break out in tears because when your body is so just done, and my body was done. I was mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever else, stretched out, thinned out. I was done. I needed to find a way to work past it so that I still have the nightmare every now and then. I don't think that that's probably ever going to go away, but it's not every night, and I'll take that. So, but I had to get to a point where I could get past that. So,
how difficult was it for you to accept being told that you had PTSD? Because I think a lot of us do think about that as, well, that's something that soldiers have, or that's something that people who have been brutally assaulted have. So was that difficult for you to accept for yourself?
Yeah, because I'm not a soldier. I'm not a police officer. I have never been the victim of an assault or things along those lines. And when my counselor told me that it was, hospitalization PTSD, I'm like, does that mean I'm a bigger wimp because I can't be in a hospital? And honestly, that's where my brain went, was that, I must be a special kind of wimp because I can't even go to a hospital. And she's like, no, it doesn't mean you're a wimp. It just means that your brain is having a hard time processing this. You've gone helping me to understand that there are different levels and different types of trauma, because in my mind, PTSD was only for, veterans of war, and to not take anything away from those fine people who have gone and done what they've done. And then, I always felt like they've earned that, they've earned the right to say, I have PTSD. I was like, I was in a hospital. They were in a war zone, fearing for their life every single day, whether they were in the shower or they were sleeping or whatever, they were fearing for their lives. They were in a heightened sense of awareness the entire time they were in that war zone. I was in a hospital. And so for me, the two just didn't seem to line up, And so it was pretty difficult for me to wrap my head around it at first. I do remember laughing at her saying, I don't have PTSD. That's like, I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking, where does this lady get her stuff from? Apparently she's very well educated and knows a lot more than me. So, and
you kept going back.
I kept going back. Because although I didn't agree with her at first, we were talking. The thing is, there were so many layers there and so many things for us to unpack. She was trying to not take on everything at once, but a lot of times when somebody's done and they're maxed out, I call it the snowblower effect. It's just everything just, it's all going out. There's no stopping it. It's so good luck catching it all, because here it comes. And she did really good. I think trying to navigate the muddy waters that I was throwing at her feet, but she was doing really good with it. So although I didn't agree with her at first about the PTSD thing, the more we talked about it, the more it started to make sense with me, because she helped me to see that there's different types of trauma. And I think that was what the kind of the turning point for me is that, in my opinion, there was trauma, and then there was just crap that people went through, and me not understanding that crap that people went through can also be trauma. And so that's where that was part of the education of Tim, was that Tim had to learn that there's different types of trauma, and that trauma affects people differently in very different ways. And so, but yeah, to not think you have PTSD and then being told you do have PTSD can be a little bit of an eye opener.
Did you ever struggle with how you were feeling and then looking at your wife, your kids, and that maybe they weren't feeling the same?
Well, yes and no, because my wife and I were going through some very similar things. We went into counseling at not at the same time. She went a couple of weeks before me, and she started telling me all the things that she liked about this counselor and the things that she was learning from this counselor. And my daughter was going to her as well. And my daughter was telling me some of the things that she was liking. And so it wasn't so much that I didn't feel like we were on the same plane, or that I didn't feel like we were experiencing the same things. I felt awkward because I felt like it's the sense of failure. That, okay, so I had failed to protect my daughter, and then she got this disease. All right, so now I'm failing to take care of myself, and now my daughter's having to go do this on her own, and without me. So there was a little bit of that feeling, and trying to navigate that and understand in my own head and mind that that I didn't have to subscribe to the stigma that's in the world around me, that men don't need to go to counseling, and men don't need therapy, and that if you express your feelings, that you're not really a man, and all these things. That was more the issue that I faced more than anything. It wasn't so much that, because my wife and I were very open and honest with each other about what we were going through, what we were feeling, and I could talk to her, and I could still talk to her, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and that kind of stuff. But for me, it was more of I felt bad because I realized that I was more letting my family down, because I was allowing the social stigmas around me to dictate whether or not I took care of myself.
I know when you first went to the therapist, you actually posted on Facebook, I think, and you talked about what you were about to do, and that you were going to therapy, you were accepting that you needed help, and you weren't ashamed to go get that. How hard was it, first off, to post that, and what kind of reaction did you get?
All right. So actually the writing of the post was super easy, because it just kind of like flew out of my fingers. Okay. It was fine until I hit the enter button. And then there was oh God, what did I just do? And before I could actually have like a calm moment of mind to go, okay, all right, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it, all that kind of stuff. Before I could even do that, I started getting reactions. And I was like, well, I guess I can't delete it now. People have seen it.
It's out there now.
Yeah, it's out there. They know about it now. So the reaction was actually very encouraging. I expected a couple of my buddies to call me and give me crap, what's up, sissy boy, going to the doctor, and it's something like that, but that didn't happen. Everybody was very encouraging. Even my buddies that I kind of expected to pick on me were the ones that were like, hey, you need to go take care of yourself. You guys have been through a lot. I was like, this was not what I was expecting. And I come to find out, at least from my experience. Now, I'm sure that again, everybody's experience is different. But from my experience, I found that the people that I told that I was going to go to counseling and that I was doing these things were all extremely encouraging, at least in my face anyway. They were extremely encouraging. That was the important part. So I don't know of anybody that was negative. I can't think of anybody right offhand that was negative about it, but I felt very supported. And I felt like that if that many people were encouraging me to do it, then clearly this is something that I should be doing. Because typically the last person to realize that you need therapy is you, because you have people who are trying to nicely suggest it to you all along the way. You really do, but you're not listening. You're not paying attention. And I had friends, looking back, I had friends and family members who were encouraging me along the way that, hey, maybe you need to go talk to somebody. Are you sure you don't need to talk to somebody? And I was like, well, I can call you if I need to. Well, yeah, but you maybe should talk. And they don't want to say doctor, but they mean doctor or a counselor or a therapist, something along those lines. So that was my experience. It was more of the just kind of getting out of my own way thing. And I felt very supported by family and friends once I started to do it. So,
what do you say to people that are anti-therapist?
Well, in nice terms, please don't be that way. No, you know what?
That was really nice.
That was the very nice version. That was the kid-friendly version. I look at people who are anti anything. Typically, if you're anti anything, typically it means you've gone too far in one direction. If you're so vocally and violently anti something. Now I say typically because there are things that we should all be very anti about. But there are good therapists, there are bad therapists. There's good doctors, there's bad doctors. There's good lawyers, there's bad lawyers, And so the key is more than listening to your buddy who has a Google community college degree, because it's not even Google University that these people are going to. It's Google College and community college. Instead of listening to them and the research, and I use air quotes on this, the research that they did that fits their own narrative and their own ideas about things, go talk to somebody who actually has an education in the field. Go talk to somebody who, and if you're even thinking about therapy, even in the slightest phase, that means you need it. That means that there's something in you that's telling you that this is the next step of something you need to do. Now, here's the thing about therapy and the anti-therapist, because most of those people who are anti-therapist have not had a good therapist. They've either not gone to therapy and they've read an article, written on, somewhere on the internet, or they've had a bad experience with a therapist. I got lucky. My therapist was very good, is very good. And, she's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. She's not afraid to tell me that, hey, try not to look at it like that. Let's look at it like this, which is helpful for me because I'm a pretty straightforward, bash me over the head type of guy. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. If I'm right, tell me I'm right. If I need to go right instead of going left, tell me, and help me change the direction. I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather do it right than do it wrong. But most of these people have not had a good experience with a therapist. So they're anti-therapy, they're anti-counselor because they had that one bad experience and they went, yep, that's it. That's all I need. And they walked away. So sometimes I compare counseling to dating. It's not very often that you find the love of your life on the first date you had. It happens for some people, but most of the time that's in a movie. My wife is not the first girl I dated. She's the right girl, and that counts, And so it's a lot the same with therapies, with a therapist. you have to have a connection with your therapist. You have to have a personality connection with your therapist. If you are, oil and water night and day, you're with the wrong therapist. You don't need somebody that's going to whisper sweet nothings in your ear and tell you why you're the prettiest girl at the party. But you do need somebody who's going to be able to help you and direct you, and somebody that you feel comfortable with. And there's a lot of different things, and depending on what your needs are, those might be different than my needs, and who I find acceptable as a therapist and comfortable with as a therapist may not be the same as you. It's like any other personal relationship. There are reasons why two people become friends, versus these other two people, because there's the mashup and the connection between personalities. And I personally feel that that's the same way when it comes to counseling and therapy. You have to find the one that's the right connection, and that may not happen the first try. So sometimes you have to put yourself back out there and find somebody else.
I love the dating analogy, and I've never heard that or thought of it that way before, but it's so true, because I hear people all the time that say, oh, I had a bad experience with a therapist, I'm never going back. Right. And if they had that attitude with dating or jobs or friendships, it would be a very sad place.
Yeah, a lot of lonely, single, broke people.
Right, right. We don't want that. Talk to me a little bit more about where you're at now with the PTSD and how you continue to manage that. I want people to know that things like that, you're not just okay one day and it's gone and everything's great. So will you talk about that process?
Sure, absolutely. And you're right. It's not a one and done thing. It's not like you go to the therapist and you go, oh, I have PTSD. All right, that answers that. All right, see you again, never. That's not the case. Typically, there's a lot to unpack behind that. And as you unpack those things, it opens up other things, and you have to deal with those things. So to use a Shrek analogy on you, onions have layers, ogres have layers, Tim has layers. And so what happens is that as you start going through these layers, you start really understanding that this is a process. And just like anything else in life, when you're somebody's trying to get better at like baseball or softball or basketball, whatever the sport is, there's going to be days where they're just not doing it so good. They might feel like Michael Jordan one day, and they might feel like the kid who got cut out of his high school basketball team the next day. And that's part of the process, is that you're learning what ways that you have to do these certain things here to make this feel better. And that takes time. So for me, I went to therapy pretty solidly for, I think, about 3 months, every Friday for 3 months. And I got to a point where I felt like I could put my big boy boots on one at a time, and I could move forward, and that I had a pretty good handle on it. And I told my counselor, I said, well, I'll be back, I'm sure of it, when I need it. That was actually today. Today was my first time in almost a year being back to my counselor, because I have some things I need to unpack. I have feelings coming back and things coming back and things that I can't, I'm having a hard time processing. So those things that you deal with, they're always going to be there in one form or another. So going to therapy isn't like the, a Mr. Clean magic eraser. It's not going to just wipe it all away and oh, look, it's done and I'm all better and, look at me go. What it is you helping you learn how to carry the baggage that you have, how it's going to cause less impact to you. You can throw a suitcase over your shoulder, that has a strap one way and it hurts your shoulders. You can put it on another way and it feels okay. Either way, you still have to carry the baggage, but it's how you carry the baggage that affects you moving forward. And that's what counseling does. And that's what therapy does. It helps you to be able to do that, because more than likely I'm going to have PTSD to some degree for the rest of my life in some form or fashion. I'm always going to have to deal with that in one way or another. So It's learning how to carry it, how to handle it, how to balance it with with the rest of your work life, your family life, your love life, everything else, because it can affect all those things if you're not careful. So yeah, please don't go to therapy thinking that a couple episodes, a couple chats, and I'm all good and I can move on. That may happen for some, but the realistic side of things, the expectation side of things, is that this is a process. It's going to take a while, and you're not going to be healed of it overnight, because what got you into therapy typically isn't a one and done experience. Typically there's multiple things that have led you to have to be there. And, as in our case, it wasn't just one day in the hospital. It was 97 days in the hospital. It wasn't just one experience in the hospital. It was 97 different experiences in the hospital. So unpacking those all and things like that. I mean, I have a whole photo album of pictures that we took while we were in the hospital, because I thought at the time that, we should, like catalog this and make sure that, we know that we're grateful for what happened. And, I still can't go back and look at the pictures. I have them. I don't think I'll ever delete them. I have pictures and videos and of people that visited and things like that. And I, on purpose, skip my Facebook memories from late March to about mid-July every year. I don't even look at them. I can't. Not yet anyway. I'm hoping that one day that I can, because there's some good memories in there too. Like I would like to be able to go back in and celebrate the day that my daughter rather started walking again. I'd like to be able to go back and celebrate the day where she was able to feed herself again. I can't do that yet. So, I'm only 2 years out from the experience, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon, but I think that that's a realistic expectation, is that, this didn't happen in one night. And there's the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I'm not going to, this issue wasn't built in one day. I'm not going to be able to tear it down and destroy it in one day either. So,
is it empowering to give yourself that grace?
It is, and it isn't. It's empowering to know that what you're going through is something that it can't be quantified very easily. And it's empowering to know that I'm not failing at what I'm doing because of what we've gone through and what we're handling. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the things we talked about in the counseling section today is overcoming the feeling of fail. And that's a big part of what I'm dealing with still, is that there's still a lot of what I do where I feel like I'm failing my family even now, and the things that I'm doing now and trying to help my family. And my wife's too kind to say anything otherwise, and that's fine. But then there's also the negative side of your brain that wants to look at that, and as much as you want to empower yourself through it, the negative side of your brain wants to tell you that, suck it up, you're a hockey player. Just suck it up, move forward, come on. And that's kind of the tough juxtaposition of all of this, is that that it's empowering, and that it's so good to have that tucked in your back pocket, to know that this isn't something that's going to be overcomable. Is that a word?
It is now.
It is now. All right. We're adding that.
That's
all right. So, but even if it's not a word, something that's overcomable that you're dealing with and you're working with, it's good to know that I started here, but maybe I'm only got a couple inches forward, but I'm still forward. And that's something that you can tell yourself and you can show yourself and you can see progress. And so that's very empowering. But where I said where it isn't is that at the same time, your mind wants to tell you that, well, yeah, you started here, but you're only here. You should be way over there by now. And that's just part of our own imperfection. We want to expect perfection when it's impossible.
So we know that therapy is one way that you have worked on your wellness and your podcast. So what else do you do to quiet that side of your brain that's just telling you to suck it up, you're a hockey player?
It goes back to me being a nerd.
Love it.
I grew up playing video games. Okay. I'm a 44-year-old man who plays Xbox with his kids. And I absolutely, for me, video games have always been the way that I quieted my mind. Because it allowed me to focus on, I could focus on the video game. I could focus on what I'm doing at hand, whether I was playing a sports video game, or a role-playing game, a shooter, whatever, because I could immerse myself in that for that time being. And I have my headphones on, so I'm in an immersive world with sight and sound and all these things. And in fact, so while we were at the hospital, the hospital that we stayed at had a hotel of sorts attached to it. So that, because it's a rehabilitation hospital, and these people who are at the rehab hospital are there for long periods of time. And so it's not uncommon, especially with parents of small children who are in the hospital, for them to want a place to stay. And so we got a room at the hospital, and had a nice TV in there and a table. And I had my boys bring me my Xbox, because at night when my wife and daughter, because I got to a point where I could no longer sleep in the room. To this day, I don't like the sound of beeping things, because I would hear the beeps of her machines and things like. And I still struggle with that. I have to open the microwave door before it gets to the end and it starts beeping. I don't like that. It's a little quirk I have developed, but I'm working on it. But even in the hospital, I brought my Xbox in, and I played Xbox at the hospital, because it was my way to unwind from the day and de-stress and relax. So, but yeah, very nerdy superhero sci-fi video games for the most part is where I go. That or music. So I'll same thing. I put my headphones on. I kind of dive into the world of music and just in fact, I started collecting vinyl again last year, and in the last couple months, I was actually able to start listening to an album again that I couldn't listen to for a while, because I used to listen to it at night while I was in the hospital room with her, so I didn't have to hear the machines. I would have my headphones in, and I would listen to this album, because I found it very soothing and relaxing. But I just got that back on vinyl, so I'm very excited about that. And I've found that I could actually start listening to it and enjoying it. And so it was kind of the first time I put it on, I put the record on, I got, I think, halfway through the first song and had to take it off. I'm like, okay, not yet. But it's, by the way, it's by Beck, his album Morning Phase. So I've gotten to the point where I can listen to that again. And if Beck ever hears this episode, if there's ever a chance for him to hear it, I want him to know that album I find to be extremely beautiful, extremely relaxing. And that's why I started listening to it at the hospital. And although I couldn't do it for a while, and it had negative memories for a little bit, it's extremely impactful on my life. And thank you for making the album. And if you guys haven't listened to Beck's Morning Phase, don't quit listening to Claudia just yet. But when she's done, go find Beck's Morning Phase and listen to that.
I love it. I also connect with music quite a bit, and it has saved me on many occasions. So I love hearing that. Tell me a little bit of wellness advice that you would give out.
Well, I always preface every bit of wellness advice with, I'm not a doctor.
Nor do you play one on TV.
Nor do I play one on TV, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So the first piece of wellness advice I always give everybody is, don't ever look up your symptoms online. That's you will have yourself convinced that you belong in a mental institution or that you're going to die within, the next 30 days. Nothing good comes from that. And that honestly, and that too goes to if you're a parent of a child and you're getting a diagnosis for yourself, when you hear that disorder or disease name come across the doctor's lips and you can't pronounce it and you don't know what it means and you're still trying to figure it out, the hardest thing that you will do is not allow yourself to pull your phone out of your pocket and go to Google and try typing it in. We did that, and that was one of the biggest mistakes that we ever made, because the first things that you will find about any disorder or disease are only the negative things. Not that there's really good things that come from Guillain-Barré syndrome. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, don't Google your symptoms, or if you know what the disorder or the disease is, get your information from qualified sources. It doesn't matter what your Uncle Bobby or Billy Ray says, or if they got a cousin down around the corner who can give you some good advice. Yeah, one of our biggest problems I think that we face in 2021 is disinformation. Whether it's about COVID, whether it's about anything else, everybody has an opinion. Everybody's an expert, and the biggest advice I can give anybody is don't get your advice from discreditable. No, that's not a word either. From bad sources. Let's just go from bad sources. Get your information from credible sources.
We are just making up all kinds of words today, and I love it.
If you hang out with me long enough, you're going to get a whole new vocabulary. And then the other thing I always tell people too is that if you're even thinking about it, wondering whether or not you need counseling or you need therapy or anything along those lines, and I said this earlier, even today, if you've thought about it, that means you need it. If you're thinking about it, if you're wondering, go find the counselor that's right for you. There's not a Tinder app for counselors, but there should be. But until that time, go find the one that's right for you. There are many amazing counselors out there and therapists out there who really care and who want to do a good job and who just want to help people. So if you find the one who's only there for a paycheck, you don't have to keep going back. If that's all they're there for, and you'll know pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But find the one who's there because it's a job that they love and it's what they want to do and they want to help people. So those are always my two biggest pieces of advice.
And could we also have somebody create the therapist Tinder for us? Because I think
if you got a friend out there who's good at app creation, and we can get the doctors and the therapists to agree to be on something where we can rate them and swipe right. Let's do this.
I love it.
Right or is it swipe left? I don't know. I've never been on the app, so I got nothing for you.
I don't utilize it. I am also married, so
yeah,
swipe. I don't know.
All I know is it's swiping and there's a direction. I don't know if it's right or left.
Right. I think left is bad. I don't know. People will let us know, though. People will now.
You can be sure of that. Yeah.
Let us know. Give me your number one piece of relationship advice.
Talk. Honestly, it seems really something. I said earlier that sometimes the greatest piece of advice are simple. Sometimes even one word. Talk. You'll be surprised how many things you can work out if you're willing to have an honest conversation and you're willing to have an open conversation and talk with your partner. Because that's what they are. That's what's, when you enter into a relationship, whether it's just a relationship, it's a marriage, whatever it may be, you're living together, you're a partnership. 50% of everything that you should be doing in life is for that other person. And so as that the other 50% that's supposed to be making you whole, talk with them about what you're going through. Have a conversation with them about where you're at in life. But you also have to realize that you can't put your expectations upon them when you're having that conversation. And that was one of the things I had to learn early on in my marriage. And I will say this till the day I die. My wife's a saint. She deserves wings and a halo. She put up with me for far too long before I caught on to that. But your expectations are your expectations. And now that doesn't mean that there aren't certain guidelines or things that you want a person to be able to meet. And that's completely okay to have expectations of those things. But when I say your expectations are, sometimes your expectations are that when by the time you get home from work, there needs to be food on the table. Well, sometimes that might just be a ham sandwich. And that's still okay. There's different expectations for different folks, and that's a kind of a dated analogy, but that's the best I can do for you right now. But, don't put your ideals upon somebody else, but be willing to have the conversation where you can find a middle ground. Maybe your partner doesn't like to cook. Maybe they work from home, but they don't like to cook, or they're not good at cooking. Are you going to put that on them that they have to make a meal every night and put that strain and stress on the relationship? Or are you going to have a conversation to bridge that gap and find a way to make and bring your other 50% in to make you whole and to make them whole? So, just have a conversation. Be willing to talk.
I love it. And the other thing I love that you said is an honest conversation and putting out what you need, but being willing to hear and make that compromise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about having an honest conversation is that sometimes when you get responses back, it's not the response you want to hear. And sometimes it can be hard to hear that. But if you're going to have an honest conversation where you're able to move forward, and you have to have those conversations that sometimes sting a little bit, because sometimes somebody's got to, put you out on blast for your crap. And so, if they need you in the relationship to be here and you're only, they need you here, but you're only here, what can you do to bridge that gap? What is it, does their expectation need to come down a little bit? Does your output need to go up a little bit? There's different things that can kind of all apply to that, but you have to be willing to hear their response, and you have to be willing to not, kind of turn the tide on them and go after them because, oh, I can't believe you said that. Sometimes you're going to hear some stuff, but sometimes it's the stuff you need to hear.
We have talked about some pretty heavy things today, so I want to lighten it up before I let you go. Now, I'm looking at you, and I think that if you were to have a tattoo, it would be Star Wars related. So tell me your thoughts on tattoos.
I think they're super cool. I think they're awesome. I think that if you have one and you're, I don't understand the ones where people, it just looks like they went to a tattoo artist and just let them loose on their arm. You're just all these random things. And if, I've never been a tattooer. I have zero. I'm a giant sissy afraid of needles. But like my brother has a ton, two of my brothers have a bunch of tattoos, and they all mean something. So I understand that there's reasons why they get these certain tattoos, and I'm sure that, in many ways you are the butterfly that's, emerging from the cocoon of your belly button. But I don't always get it. I don't always understand it. I looked very seriously when I was about 18 at getting a tattoo. I was at a tattoo parlor. I sat down in the chair. The second he turned on the needle, done. I'm gone. See you later. Bye. I couldn't do it. Threw some money at him. Said, thank you for your time. Sorry to tie up your chair. Here's some money. Thanks for your day. But yeah, it would probably be Star Wars related in some way. Actually, the other one that I had thought about getting it, because when I was 18, it was going to be a really cool Celtic armband, because those weren't popular at all. No. And nobody else had one. not even one. The other thing that I thought about getting was the claddagh on my chest, the Irish claddagh. With all of my wife's initials and birth date, and then my 3 children's initials and birth date, kind of encircling around it. And I was going to put that on my chest, and I looked at that, and I went, Nope, not going to do that. But instead, I made it as a design because that's what I do for the day job. I'm a logo designer, and I sell silly shirts on the internet, and that's what I do. And so I was like, well, that's what we're going to do. So yeah, skip the tattoo. Just made a sticker out of it.
I love that though. So there are machines now that really don't make that noise.
Dude, there's still a needle attached.
There is.
So it's not the noise was definitely part of it, but yeah, no thanks on the needle portion.
Were you literally in the chair getting ready to get tattooed?
Yeah, he was getting ready. Yeah, had like the pre thing down on my arm for the
stencil.
Yeah, the stencil was on my arm, and we were ready to go. And yeah.
And that was your Celtic? Was that going to be your Celtic tattoo?
Oh yeah, I was gonna have this killer Celtic armband. I was gonna be so super cool, like every other 18-year-old in 1997. So
I think you're still super cool, Tim, even without your Celtic armband. Well, Tim, where can people find you if they want to know more, want to join in on your nerdiness, want to listen to your podcasts?
Well, so the audio version of Focused on Forward, Funny Science Fiction, and Pop Culture Addicts can all be found on any of your favorite audio podcast destinations. So that's not a problem. If you want to talk with me personally, the best way to do it is on Twitter. I have a Facebook account, but I'm becoming less and less friendly with Facebook. I got put in a pseudo jail on Facebook recently for quoting a 1980s movie, and I was told that I was inciting violence. So Facebook removed my content and put me in jail for 24 hours. And I said, well, so I stopped using Facebook as much. I'm still an admin on a big Facebook group, so I still use Facebook for that and try to communicate with them. But for the shows, if you want to talk with me about any of my shows, and I post pretty regular on Twitter for all three shows. Focused on Forward is at Podcast FOF. Funny Science Fiction is at Funny Sci-Fi. And Pop Culture Addicts is at PCA Pod Show. Now, Pop Culture Addicts and Funny Science Fiction both have a YouTube channel under those names, and those are video interviews. And we do a live show every Monday night at 7:00 Eastern on YouTube. And we have different podcasters and everyone, just people from wherever come on, and we talk nerdy with them. And our slogan on the show is all nerdy, no dirty. And we try to keep it very family friendly and so that everybody can join in on the nerdiness and have fun. And yeah. So, but those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And if you want to watch the shows, don't forget to subscribe.
Absolutely. And I love the nerdiness, and I love that you embrace that and you share that with others.
Yeah, and the thing is too is that I always tell people too, they're like, oh well, there's a lot of sci-fi podcasts out there. There are. I always say though that the thing that separates us from the other people is that we're willing to be silly and usually are. And even in our interviews, we ask a couple silly questions, we ask a couple serious questions. And our whole goal is just to laugh with our guests. That's our goal. If we can make our guests laugh, we feel like we're doing something good. And the thing is, we always tell people, if you're looking for a deep dive on Star Wars or Marvel comics or something like that, those are fun, those are enjoyable, but you're not going to find them here. We don't do the deep dive. We talk about, the things we like, and, we go into a little bit of depth on them, but, nothing that's real strong deep dive. It's all pretty much on the surface, having fun, and just, if we can giggle, we'll get the giggles out. So, I've just been, we've been really fortunate with Funny Science Fiction to talk with some of the people we've talked to, and like just a quick plug, for instance, and shameless self-promotion. Sorry.
Love it. Do it.
So one of my favorite episodes that we've had as of late is we've been doing a lot with different voice actors, which is cool for me because these are people that I grew up listening to, and they, they were, voice actors for cartoons and characters and things, all kinds of stuff when I was, growing up, cartoons that I watched. And so for me, one of the coolest ones is we got to interview a gentleman by the name of Larry Kenny, which his name might not mean anything to you right off the bat, but Larry Kenny was Lion-O from the Thundercats. He was the head, the top. I can't say top dog because they were cats, but he was the top kitty. So that was really cool, and we got to talk with Shannon Farnan, who was the original Wonder Woman in the Super Friends cartoons back in the 70s and early 80s. So before Linda Carter was, and everything else, and Gal Gadot, she was Wonder Woman. And so that was kind of cool, and so we've had some really fun conversations and things like that. So it's been good smile therapy.
And sometimes that is the absolute best therapy of all.
Oh yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing your story, giving us some laughs, and telling us about your podcast where we can go find the nerdy side of Tim and have some giggles along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this.
I really hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Tim as much as I did. I truly appreciate his willingness to open up about his own mental health struggles and coping with his PTSD. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're available on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.